Hello kids, so here your teacher Raminder Kaur, and as we have started chapter number 17, breathing and exchange of gases. So in the very first video lecture we have talked about the basic introduction of various kind of respiratory organs found in different animals, and today we are going to start with the main process, that is human respiratory system. This you have studied in the lower classes as well, but here little bit complexity and some organs are added, and you have to go in the details that how the exchange of gases takes place. So first of all, as inhalation has done, so nostrils are the two, or we can say a pair of openings which are present above the upper lips. So these openings are called as nostrils. So when we inhale oxygen or air from the nostrils, it will enter into a nasal cavity, and nasal cavity will take that air into a nasal chamber, and finally it will open into a pharynx. So pharynx is a portion that having a connectivity of two pipes with it. One is called as food pipe or esophagus, and second which is called as windpipe or trachea. So pharynx will open into a windpipe, and there is one box which is called as voice box or sound box, that is called as larynx. It is made up of cartilaginous tissue, and it helps in production of sound through which we are able to speak and communicate. So whenever we swallow, the glottis can be covered. So glottis is the topmost part. It should be covered with epiglottis. So it is a flap-like structure which can open as well as close. That's why it is usually recommended that do not speak or do not talk while eating. What can happen? The food particles can enter into trachea and it can choke our windpipe. So you have to quietly eat your food. Then trachea is a very straight tube, and it divides at the level of fifth thoracic vertebra. So it is the vertebral column. So different vertebrae are present in our thoracic cavity. So thoracic portion is called that part where our chest is present and where our lungs are present. So that's why its name is called thoracic. So bronchi are branched like a tree branches. So windpipe will divide both into right and left hand side, so which we call as primary bronchi. It will further undergo various kind of divisions, primary and secondary, as well as tertiary bronchi will produce, and finally it will terminate into bronchioles. So all the things like trachea, primary, secondary, tertiary bronchi, and the initial bronchioles, they all are supported by cartilaginous rings. So why cartilaginous rings are very important to be present on the trachea or on the other parts of bronchi and bronchioles? Because it will prevent the collapsing of the windpipe, right? So every bronchiole will end into a balloon-like or bag-like structure that is vascular in nature, called as alveoli. So all these parts, they are comprising the lungs. We have pair of lungs in our body. So they are covered by double layered pleura. So you can see the yellow colored part on the side of the lungs. So that two membranes, these are called as pleural membranes, and one fluid is present inside them. The fluid is named as pleural fluid. A ring-like structures found on both sides of lungs, they are the cut end of ribs. And the lower portion is called as diaphragm, which plays an important role in inhalation and exhalation. Trachea is showing cartilaginous rings. So these labelings are very important, as we have already talked about epiglottis, which is a flap-like structure that open and close, that is present above the larynx, which is the voice box. So here we will talk about what is the need of a fluid that is present between two pleural membranes because it reduces the friction. That's why it is important structure. So this diagram is very important. Now, if we talk about the part which is starting with the external nostrils and ending till the bronchioles, that part is called as conducting part. It will include nostril, nasal passage, nasal chamber, pharynx, larynx, then trachea, bronchi, which will include primary bronchi, secondary bronchi, tertiary bronchi, and bronchioles. Why it is called as conducting? Because it is just a road. Nothing is being trapped, nothing is being absorbed. Air is just passing through these parts. But if we come to the bag-like structure, which are the alveoli and the various kind of ducts to which it is attached to the body tissues, that is called as a respiratory part or a exchange part, because here the exchange of gases will takes place. So the first part, that is conducting part, what are the different roles? That number one, it is just a pathway. Number second, it humidifies the air that is coming from the surrounding, and it also brings the air to body temperature. Like suppose it is a winter season and everywhere there is fog, right? So temperature is very low, but our body temperature, as it always remains same, 37 degrees Celsius. So conducting part plays an important role to regulate the body temperature. So that air which was at 6 degrees Celsius, it will come at 37, right? And even it will clear the unwanted particles. It can be bacteria, it can be dust, it can be dirt, etc. But if we talk about respiratory part, that is also known as exchange part, it is an actual site where the diffusion of oxygen and carbon dioxide takes place between the connective tissue called as blood and the atmospheric air. If the question comes about lungs, so they are situated in thoracic chamber, that is totally an airtight chamber. Otherwise, the air can leak. So thoracic chamber is formed dorsally by the vertebral column, means at the back of the lungs, it is supported by the vertebral column, a notochord, and in the front by the sternum. As I have already talked about sternum, it is a chest bone. If you feel in between your lungs, you can feel hardness there. So that is called as sternum. On the sides, if you can feel, ribs are present. And on the lower side, above the abdomen, diaphragm is present. So this internal structure of lungs in the thorax, it is in such a way that whenever we inhale the air, our body can take up that volume of air inside, so that during inhalation, the thoracic cavity will increase its volume, and during exhalation, it will reduce its volume. So such an arrangement is very important. Otherwise, it will be difficult, because when something is coming from outside, there should be some space to store it, right? So respiration involves different steps in them. On the left hand side, you can see the various definitions are written, like breathing, external respiration, gas transport by blood, internal respiration, and cellular respiration. So you can see how schematically we are moving from breathing to the respiration process. It is not just a one-step process that oxygen has been inhaled and now respiration has been done. It has to go through within the steps within the body, that first air will come and it will come to the lungs, then from the lungs to the blood, from the blood to the body cells, and inside the body cells that oxygen will be used up and breakdown of food will take place, and ultimately it will produce carbon dioxide. So similarly, it is written here as well as in the book also. So number one, breathing, we can also call it as pulmonary ventilation. So pulmonary term is always used in existence of lungs. So atmospheric air is taken in and carbon dioxide is released out. Number second, across the alveolar membrane. Across the alveolar membrane, there is exchange of gases or diffusion of gases, and then blood will help in transport of gases, then diffusion between blood and tissues, and at last cells, they will have this oxygen, they will utilize it for breakdown and oxidation of food will takes place. Now let's talk about mechanism of breathing. So simply, it is divided in two stages. Number one, inhalation means inflow of oxygen inside, and expiration means the air, it will go outside. So it is created by, there is pressure gradient produced between the lungs and the atmosphere. We all know that amount of air present in the atmosphere is more as compared to our body. But diffusion cannot take place simply, right? Because our body cells are not in direct contact with the atmosphere. That's why we require a respiratory organ called as lungs. So during inspiration, if the pressure within the lungs is less, right, then the atmospheric pressure means if there is a negative pressure in the lungs with respect to atmospheric pressure, then only inspiration can occur. So similarly, expiration will take place when there is a positive pressure, when intrapulmonary pressure is more as compared to the atmospheric pressure. So two kind of organs or two kind of muscles which play very important role during this inspiration and expiration, or we can also replace them at inhalation or exhalation. Two kind of muscles are playing important role. Number one, diaphragm, and number second, ribs, right? So diaphragm and ribs, they play important role, and then that gradient is created. Gradient means a pressure is created so that the body can intake the air inside. So inspiration, how can it start? So let me zoom this, so then you can easily understand that how the processes are going on. So you can see here in this picture, if you look upon inhalation, so rib cage, right, in which ribs are present, they will expand. So how they can expand? If they will contract, right? So once they contract, they will expand. Why there is a need to expand, or why there is a need to contract the ribs? Because we need the cavity so that it can increase the space. So whenever we inhale, there should be a space so that air can be filled inside. So diaphragm will also contract, so it will move down, right? And on the case of exhalation, so when we have to exhale the carbon dioxide or the air, so ribs will come to their original position, so the muscles will relax and the cage will get smaller, because there is now very less air inside and there is a need to create such kind of pressure so that air has to released outside. Even during exhalation, diaphragm will also relax and come back to its original position. So this is very important. You have to remember that how these intercostal muscles, they are playing an important role. And sternum is also bringing that pressure inside them. It helps in increasing the volume of the thoracic chamber. Either you can write thoracic chamber or thoracic cavity. So overall, when this volume increases, it will increase in pulmonary volume, means air will come inside, and during that intrapulmonary pressure will get decrease, right, as compared to atmosphere, which will force the air to move into the lungs. Then only the air can come inside. And on the other hand side, so let's first of all talk about this diagram as well. Similarly, all points are written. Ribs and sternum are raised because there is contraction. It is inspiration or inhalation. Then diaphragms, they are contracted, right? They are coming down. And volume of thoracic cavity or thoracic chamber, it has increased. So air can easily come inside the lungs. And now let's talk about during exhalation what will happen. So when diaphragm will relax, right? So it will come up. And the intercostal muscles, they will turn the diaphragm, and even the sternum as well as the ribs, they will come back to their original position. So you can see the arrows, they are showing inwards, right? Now thoracic cavity, you can compare the thoracic cavity. In the first diagram, it is big, the space is more. But in the second case, now space has reduced because now it is a need to remove or expel the air from the lungs. So these organs are playing very important role. So we have the ability to increase the strength of inspiration. Like suppose if I say to you and recommend you that start focusing on your inhalation and exhalation. So generally when you are listening to me, then it is going on at a very normal rate. Then if I say, or if you go to doctor and doctor says breathe in and breathe out forcefully, then the volume of that air which is entering inside, that is increasing, right? So we have a strength, we have that ability that we can increase the volume of air. During the morning walk, during the yoga, during the meditation, it is being said because more oxygen as it is entering, so it is directly proportional to your energy. More oxygen, more breakdown of the glucose, and more energy will be produced in the body. So here you have to remember that on an average, healthy human breathes 12 to 16 times per minute. You can count for your own as well. So volume of air that is involved in various breathing movements, it can be estimated by an instrument that is called as spirometer. So it helps in find out in the patients like they are dealing with asthma, who have breathing problems, pneumonia, so that how their inhalation and exhalation varies from each other. So students, today we have talked about the process of respiratory system, its different organs, the labelings, and even the mechanism, how inhalation and exhalation bring the air till lungs only. Right? In the next video lecture, we will talk about respiratory volumes and capacities. Till then, thank you.